Jack-o'-lantern soup. It was a beautiful autumn day at Maple Grove Elementary, and Mrs. Henderson's third-grade class was buzzing with excitement. Today was the day they would finally carve their class jack-o'-lantern for the Halloween contest. "Now remember, children," Mrs. Henderson said, adjusting her orange sweater covered in dancing leaves, "we need to be very careful when we bring our pumpkin inside. It's quite large." What Mrs. Henderson didn't know was that the school janitor, Mr. Pete, had just delivered not one, but two enormous pumpkins to the school that morning. One was for Mrs. Henderson's class, and the other was for the cafeteria to make pumpkin soup for lunch. But in all the morning hustle and bustle, the pumpkins had gotten switched. Tommy Martinez was the first to notice something strange when they gathered around their pumpkin. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, scratching his head, "didn't our pumpkin have a big brown spot on the side yesterday? And wasn't it kind of lopsided?" added Lucy Chen, tilting her head like a curious dog. Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm sure it's fine. Pumpkins can look different from different angles. Now, who wants to help me draw the face?" What they didn't realize was that their pumpkin was the cafeteria's prized pumpkin that Mrs. Garcia, the head cook, had lovingly grown to make delicious pumpkin soup for the students. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Mrs. Garcia was staring at her pumpkin with growing confusion. This pumpkin had a brown spot on it and sat lopsided on the counter. "Aye," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in the air. "What happened to my beautiful pumpkin?" Back in the classroom, the students were having a great time. Emma Rodriguez suggested they give their jack-o'-lantern fancy eyebrows, which looked suspiciously like two fuzzy caterpillars. Jake Thompson insisted on adding freckles, which turned out to be about 20 tiny holes poked with a pencil. And Olivia Kim had the brilliant idea to make the mouth into a circular surprise, instead of a regular scary grin. "This is the best jack-o'-lantern ever," shouted Marcus Williams, doing a little dance around the classroom. Mrs. Henderson stepped back to admire their work. The pumpkin certainly looked unique. It had lopsided triangle eyes, because she couldn't cut in a straight line, eyebrows that looked like hairy worms, a crooked nose that resembled a lightning bolt, and a mouth that made it look surprised in the most confusing way possible. "Well," said Mrs. Henderson, "it's certainly creative." Just then, there was a knock at the classroom door. Mrs. Garcia entered, still wearing her hairnet and holding a large spoon. "Excuse me. Excuse me," she panted. "Has anyone seen my pumpkin?" "She's about this big." Mrs. Garcia stretched her arms, orange, very round, and absolutely perfect for soup. The entire class turned to look at their newly carved jack-o'-lantern sitting on the desk. Tommy's eyes grew wide. Mrs. Henderson? I think we might have made a tiny mistake." Mrs. Garcia followed their gaze and let out a gasp. "Gertrude! What have you done to my pumpkin?" "Gertrude," whispered Lucy. Mrs. Henderson's face turned as red as the maple leaves outside. "Oh my! Mrs. Garcia, I am so sorry. We had no idea," but before she could finish apologizing, Mrs. Garcia started laughing. She laughed so hard she had to sit down in one of the tiny student chairs, which made her look like a giant in a hairnet. "You know what?" Mrs. Garcia giggled, wiping tears from her eyes. "I've been making pumpkin soup the same way for 20 years. But I've never made pumpkin soup from a jack-o'-lantern with bushy eyebrows." The students looked at each other and giggled. Does this mean we're not in trouble? Asked Emma. Mrs. Garcia stood up, still chuckling. Trouble? No, Mija. This means we're going to have the most interesting lunch this school has ever seen. Everyone who helped carve this jack-o'-lantern gets to come to the cafeteria and help me make jack-o'-lantern soup. But what about the Halloween contest? Asked Marcus. Mrs. Garcia winked. Well, we'll just have to use the other pumpkin, the one that's currently sitting in my kitchen. And that's exactly what they did. Mrs. Garcia's original pumpkin won third place in the Halloween contest for most creative use of mixed media. The jack-o'-lantern soup became legendary at Maple Grove Elementary. From that day forward, Mrs. Garcia and Mrs. Henderson made sure to coordinate their pumpkin deliveries. But every autumn, they would retell the story of the Great Pumpkin Mix-Up, and every year, the third graders would beg to make jack-o'-lantern soup again. Mrs. Garcia kept a photo of Gertrude's carved face on the kitchen wall, and every October, she would pat it gently and whisper, "Thank you, Gertie, for the best mistake I ever tasted." If you ever visit Maple Grove Elementary on a crisp autumn day, you might still catch a whiff of that famous soup wafting through the hallways, along with the sound of children giggling about the time they accidentally turned lunch into a jack-o'-lantern. The end.